Good afternoon, and welcome to this grand finale of post-flight shuttle briefings here at the James Webb Auditorium at NASA headquarters. Welcome to everybody here in the audience. And to all of you watching on NASA TV. My name's Alan Ladwig, and I'm going to be your host today. We're here to honor the crew of STS-135, the last space shuttle mission that completed a 30-year string of successful shuttle flights. And when they flew Atlantis, they launched on July 8th, landed on July 21st, and they're here today to tell you about their adventure. And now I'd like to introduce our Deputy Administrator, Lori Garver.
Thank you, Alan. It's very nice to be here. I would also welcome you. The grand finale, make sure you realize, as Alan said, it's of the shuttle cruise. We're going to have lots more cruises, I'm sure we'll talk about. But for us, this is a very special crew to have been on STS-135. And I know when we have had shuttle crews after each mission in the past, they have said how much they appreciate being able to come and talk to employees. They really count on the entire NASA and contractor workforce, of course, to be able to do what they do. And it is a mutual admiration society because I know as the non-astronaut part of the leadership team at NASA how much we admire the astronauts who risk their lives to blaze this trail for us all. So we have met Charlie and I with this crew a few times. So a couple days ago, almost uniquely, not all crews asked this. They turned around and asked of me what they could do to help. And of course, being here is exactly what it is that we have asked them to help us with now after they have completed their very successful mission. And it's not only to talk to you. They've spent their time in the last couple of days on the Hill talking with the leadership of the nation about the very importance of what it is we do. Not only with the Space Shuttle program, but now with the International Space Station and with our future that we have outlined, which is absolutely critical to going forward as a nation, being able to out-innovate and be able to return great benefit to society. What is NASA's vision? To reach for new heights and reveal the unknown so that what we do and learn will benefit all humankind. That is what this crew actually helped us do. They secured the space station for the period of time until we have our own vehicles again, launching from the United States with cargo and crew. They helped develop the very scientific programs that they're going to be telling us about specifically that are going on the space station. We have, with STS-135, continued this great exploration effort of creating a spacefaring civilization. And I know that the entire NASA workforce thanks them. Those of you in the room and online, there are a bunch of you here, especially who we know will follow in the path that they did blaze. So let me welcome the crew of STS-135, Chris Ferguson, Doug Hurley, Sandy Magnus, and Rex Waldheim. Chris.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be back for the final installment of the shuttle post-flight debriefs. I'll introduce the rest of the crew in just a moment, but let me just say how honored we were to represent the closeout of the Space Shuttle program, and especially it was our privilege to thank and acknowledge all the folks who, throughout the shuttle's 30-year history, gave great credibility and credence to this wonderful program that we've run over the last 30 years, and how fortunate we have been to have just had the Space Shuttle. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to my left is the pilot, Doug Hurley, Doug is an active duty colonel in the Marine Corps. This was Doug's second flight. His responsibilities on this mission were all things robotic. He worked the Space Shuttle's robotic arm, did a fantastic job. I sort of backed him up, but he was basically a one-man show on inspection day. He also worked the space station's robotic arm along with Sandy. He flew the undocking. He backed me up for the rendezvous, and of course was there every step of the way, making sure that everything was done appropriately and per the procedures, and just did a fantastic job. He comes from upstate New York and is a graduate of Tulane University. To Doug's left is Sandy Magnus. Sandy Magnus is no stranger to spaceflight. She spent 4.5 months on the space station about 3 years ago. I had the privilege of taking her up on STS-126. She flew a shuttle flight, STS-112, back in 2002. So this was her third flight. She also was a robotic expert up there. She installed and uninstalled the MPLM. But her primary responsibility in this flight, which she absolutely excelled at, was the load master. And the load master is the inventory manager, making sure that we take everything over there that belongs over there. We bring everything back that's supposed to be back. And the latest feedback we got was that we got just about everything right. So she did a fantastic job, and it was great having her expertise, and especially her station expertise. We were able to free up the station crew while we were there. We could just ask Sandy where everything was. So it was awesome to have her. To Sandy's left is Rex Walheim. Rex is a retired Air Force colonel. Rex's primary responsibility on this was he was our EVA expertise, and all this crew, this abbreviated crew, didn't perform a spacewalk while we were up there. We essentially facilitated a host spacewalk by the space station crew. But the space station crew had their last NVL run, their last serious practice run on Earth, months beforehand. So Rex was responsible for taking all the latest updates to the procedures up there, giving them a good brief, and then he was the intravehicular, basically the voice of the EVA during the process of it. And during that spacewalk, of course, we brought inside the pump module, the ammonia pump module that had failed on last summer, and we also deployed a robotics refueling module, which you'll hear a little bit more about lately. And he's a native of California and went to UC Berkeley. Good, you can applaud for this wonderful crew. We took a little liberty with our post-flight presentation because we could. So what you'll see is this is a narrated about 12 to 14-minute video. There's some historical perspective up front, so maybe some things you didn't know about the space shuttle. Then there's a real nice music video that goes with an ascent and entry sequence, and then we'll wrap up with just some perceptions that the crew has on where we're headed from here. So, and then afterward, we'll come back with the crew. We'll answer some questions and give you some personal anecdotes from the mission. So, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and roll the video?
What does it take to just send something in orbit without having any aerodynamics to worry about? You know, we did that throughout the 60s. To send something to orbit and bring it back as an airplane, that's a whole other synthesis of aero and space. And we're reminded how beautiful a word that is, aerospace. Two fragments that were never brought together before they needed to. And the shuttle is the living example of what it is when aeronautics meets space exploration.
September 1976, more than 4.5 years after President Nixon signed off on its development, America's new spacecraft, Constitution, gets its first close-up before the cameras. The orbiter itself was well received by the public, but impassioned fans of a particular long-canceled television series called Star Trek wanted it called something else. They staged a successful write-in campaign, and the orbiter was renamed for the Starship featured on the show. Thus, NASA's new shuttle would be the Enterprise, boldly going as no spacecraft had ever gone before. Whatever its name, this bird still needed to prove it could fly. August 12, 1977. On a crystal clear California morning, high above the Mojave Desert, 2 NASA test pilots ready for Enterprise's first flight. The plan was for Fred Hayes, Jr. and Gordon Fullerton to lift the orbiter off a modified 747, then land on a dry lake bed 15,000 feet below. Columbia was undergoing preparations for the program's maiden voyage.
STS-1, an unflown vehicle, and those 2 men getting on board and flying that, trusting that the engineering was correct, trusting that the design was correct, trusting that all the safety measures were in place. To me, it's just amazing.
And you just looked at it on the pad and you said, this looks like no other rocket that I've ever seen before. It's got huge boosters, a tank in the middle, and it's got the equivalent of an airliner hanging off the side. And even though today, by today's standards, it's a very common sight, we're used to seeing it, by the early 80s standards, it was completely revolutionary. And to know that it really wasn't going to fly a test flight. It had flown some gliding landings, but it hadn't flown a real test flight. And the first time it was going to fly, it was going to have two people on board, John Young, Bob Crippen. That was a major milestone.
I remember all the talk about the shuttle in the early days, and there was such an excitement in the air because up until then, what were we doing? A capsule would go up and it would plunk down in the ocean. You had to go fish it out. And now we were making a space plane. How awesome is that? It's a rocket when you need it to be a rocket, and it's an airplane when you need it and want it to be an airplane. And so, what a promise for the future of the space program that represented.
When a generation accomplishes a great thing, it's got a right to stand back and for just a moment admire and take pride in its work.
Okay, Fergie, we're starting to feel pretty good down here on the ground about this one today. So on behalf of the greatest team in the world, good luck to you and your crew on the final flight of this true American icon. And so for the final time, Fergie, Doug, Sandy, and Rex, good luck, Godspeed, and have a little fun up there.
Hey, thanks to you and your team, Mike. Until the very end, you all made it look easy. The shuttle's always going to be a reflection of what a great nation can do when it dares to be bold and commits to follow through. We're not ending the journey today, Mike. We're completing a chapter of a journey that will never end. You and the thousands of men and women who gave their hearts, souls, and their lives for the cause of exploration have